Welcome back to Skellig part 4. We are on chapter 19, that's what I do know. So, it says, her blanket and books were still on the lawn, but she wasn't there. I looked up into the tree, and she wasn't there. I stepped over the wall, went to her front door, and rang her doorbell. Her mother came. Is Mina in? I asked. She had jet black hair, like Mina's. She wore an apron covered in dabs of paint and clay. She is, she said. She put her hand out. You must be Michael. I'm Mrs. McKee. I shook her hand. Mina, she shouted. How's the baby? She asked. Very well. Well, we think she'll be very well. Babies are stubborn things, strugglers and fighters. Tell your parents I'm thinking of them. I will. Mina came to the door. She had a paint-splashed apron on too. We're modelling, she said. Come and see. She led us through to the kitchen. There were big balls of clay in plastic bags on the table. The table was covered in a plastic sheet. There were knives and wooden tools. Mina's book of bird drawings was open at the blackbird. She showed me the clay she was working with. It was just a lump, but I could see the outline of a bird. A broad body, a pointed bill, a flattened tail. She added more clay and pinched the body and began to draw out its wings. Mina's fixated on birds just now, said Mrs. McKee. Sometimes it's things that swim. Sometimes it's things that slink through the night. Sometimes it's things that creep and crawl. But just now, it's things that fly. I looked around. There was a shelf full of clay models. Foxes, fish, lizards, hedgehogs, little mice. Then an owl, with its great round head, its pointed beak, and its fierce claws. Did you make those? I asked. Mina laughed. They're brilliant, I said. She showed me how the clay would be shaped if the bird were in flight, how she could mark the weathers in with a pointed knife. Once it's fired and glazed, I'll hang it from the ceiling. I picked up a piece of clay, rubbed it between my fingers, rolled it between my palms. It was cold and grainy. Mina licked her finger, rubbed the clay, showed how it would be made shiny smooth. I watched her, copied her. I worked the clay again, drew it into the shape of a snake, pushed it all together again and made the shape of a human head. I thought of the baby. I started to shape her thin, delicate form, her arms and legs, her head. Like magic, eh? Said Mina. Like magic, yes. Sometimes I dream I make them so real they'll walk away and fly out of my hands. Do you use clay at school? We do sometimes. We did in one class I was in. Michael could come and work with us sometimes, said Mina. Mrs. McKee looked at me. Her eyes were as piercing as Mina's, but more gentle. He could, she said. I've told him what we think of schools, said Mina. Mrs. McKee laughed. And I've told him about William Blake. I went on making the baby. I tried to form the features of her face. The clay started to dry out in the heat of my fingers, and it started to crumble. I caught Mina's eye. I tried to tell her with my eyes that we had to go. Can I go for a walk with Michael? She said immediately. Yeah? Wrap your clay in plastic and you can get on with it when you come back. Chapter 20. I led her quickly along the front street. Then I turned into the back lane. I led her past the high back garden walls. Where are we going? She said. Not far. I looked at her yellow top and blue jeans. This place is filthy, though, I said, and it's dangerous. She buttoned the blouse to her throat. She clenched her fists. Good, she said. Keep going, Michael. I opened our back garden gate. Here, she said. She stared at me. Yes. I stood at the garage door with her. She peered into the gloom. I picked up the beer and the torch. We'll need these, I said. I took the capsules from my pocket, and these as well. Her eyes narrowed, and she looked right into me. Trust me, I said. I hesitated. It's not just that it's dangerous, I said. I'm worried that you won't see what I think I see. She took my hand and squeezed it. I'll see whatever's there, she whispered. Take me in. I switched on the torch and stepped inside. Things scratched and scuttled across the floor. I felt Mina tremble. Her palms began to sweat. I held her hand tight. It's all right, I said. Just keep close to me. We squeezed between the rubbish and the broken furniture. Cobwebs snapped on our clothes and skin. Dead blue bottles attached themselves to us. The ceiling creaked and dust fell from the rotten timbers. As we approached the tea chests, I started to shake. Maybe Mina would see nothing. Maybe I'd been wrong all along. Maybe dreams and truth were just a useless muddle in my head. I leaned forward, shone the light into the gap behind the tea chests. Again, he squeaked. I heard Mina stifle a cry. I felt her hands stiffen. I pulled her closer. It's all right, I whispered. I brought my friend, I said, like I said I would. This is Mina. He turned his eyes towards her, then lowered them again. I showed him the brown ale. I brought this as well. He laughed, but he didn't smile. I squeezed through to him. I snapped the cap off the bottle with the opener on the knife and crouched beside him. He tipped his head back and let me pour some of the beer into his mouth. He swallowed. Some of it trickled from his mouth onto his black suit. Nectar, he sighed. Drink of the gods. He tipped his head back again and I poured again. I looked at Mina's dark form, looking down at us, her pale face, her mouth and eyes gaping in astonishment. Who are you? She whispered. Mister had enough of you, he squeaked. I saw a doctor, I said. Not Dr. Death, one that could fix you. No doctors, nobody, nothing. Let me be. You'll die. You'll crumble away and die. Grumble, grumble. He tipped his head back. More beer. I poured more beer. I brought these as well, I said. I held out a cod liver oil capsule out to him. Some people swear by them, I said. He sniffed. Stink of fish, he squeaked. Slimy, slithering, swimming things. There were tears in my eyes. He just sits here, I said. He doesn't care. It's like he's wanting to die. I don't know what to do. Do nothing, he squeaked. He closed his eyes, lowered his head. Mina came in behind us. She crouched, stared at his face as dry and pale as plaster, at the dead blue bottles and cobwebs, at the spiders and beetles that scuttled across him. She took the torch from me. She shone it on his thin body in the dark suit, on the long legs stretched out on the floor, on the swollen hands that rested at his side. She picked up one of the dark furry balls from beside him. Who are you? She whispered. Nobody. She reached out and touched his cheek. Dry and cold, she whispered. How long have you been here? Long enough. Are you dead? He groaned. Kids' questions. Always the same. Tell her things, I said. She's clever. She'll know what to do. He laughed, but he didn't smile. Let me see her, he said. Mina turned the torch to her face, and it was brilliant white, with pitch-dark gaps where her mouth and eyes were. I'm called Mina, she said. She sighed. I'm Mina, she said. You're Mina, he said. I'm sick to death. She touched his hands. She lifted his filthy cuff and touched his scrawny, twisted wrists. Calcification, she said. The process by which the bone hardens, becomes inflexible. The process by which the body turns to stone. Not as stupid as she looks, he squeaked. It is linked to another process, she said, by which the mind too becomes inflexible. It stops thinking and imagining. It becomes hard as bone. It is no longer a mind. It is a lump of bone wrapped in a wall of stone. This process is ossification. He sighed. More beer, he said. I poured more beer into his mouth. Take her away, he whispered. The roof trembled in the breeze. Dust fell on us. Mina and I crouched close together, our knees almost resting on him. She twisted her face as she caught the stench of his breath. I took her hand and guided it to his shoulder blades. I pressed her fingertips against the bulge beneath his jacket. She leaned across him, felt his other shoulder blade. When she looked at me, her eyes in the torchlight were shining bright. Her face was almost touching his. Their pale skin bloomed in the torchlight. What are you? She whispered. No answer. He sat there with his head lowered, his eyes closed. We can help you, she whispered. No answer. I felt the tears running from my eyes. There's somewhere we could take you, said Mina. It's safer there. Nobody would know. You could just sit there dying too if that's what you really want. Something brushed past us. I shone the torch down, saw Whisper entering the space behind the tea chests. Whisper, said Mina. The cat moved to his side, pressed itself against his damaged hands. He sighed. Smooth and soft, he whispered. His knuckles moved against the cat's fur. Sweet thing, he whispered. Whisper purred. The timbers creaked. Dust fell on us again. Please let's take you somewhere, I said. More beer, he whispered. I held out a cod liver oil capsule. Take one of these as well, I said. He tipped his head back. I poured the beer in and dropped the capsule on his pale tongue. He opened his eyes. He looked deep into Mina, and she looked deep into him. You must let us help you, she said. He was silent for a long time. Do what you want. Okay, right. What do you think their plan is? What are they going to do? Where are they going to take Skellig? And what do you think he is? What is he? Okay, right. I will see you tomorrow for the next instalment. Have a lovely day. Bye.